If every conversation in your game turns into either a persuasion roll or awkward silence, you are not alone. Most new dungeon masters or game masters are taught how to run combat encounters, but not how to run conversations. And today we're going to fix that. Welcome to the Bearded Nerd Podcast, where I help new players and game masters learn, play, and grow their love for tabletop RPGs. When people think about Dungeons and Dragons, they usually think about the combat, the fighting of monsters. You roll some dice that look funny, and you fight goblins or orcs or trolls or just any sort of monster. But some of the most memorable moments in Dungeons and Dragons don't happen with swords drawn. They happen across a table, whether it's in a throne room or a tavern or a conversation whispered in the dark. It happens when two or more people are talking with one another. So today we're talking about social encounters, what they are, why they matter, and how to make them more meaningful, even if you're brand new to Dungeons and Dragons. So with that being said, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and let's dive into this episode of the Bearded Nerd Podcast. First things first, let's define what a social encounter is. A social encounter is any moment where the players are either interacting with a non-player character. Number two, a social encounter is any moment where the outcome depends on conversation, negotiation, or persuasion. And number three, a social encounter is any moment where something meaningful is at stake. So it's not just talking. Talking matters, but it's the conversation that is had that matters the most. For you, what is important is that a social encounter is not a performance. It is a situation with stakes. Now, why does a social encounter fall flat? Well, oftentimes new dungeon masters often run into one of these three problems. They make every conversation become a single roll, whether it's persuasion, intimidation, any of the classic roles that would constitute some sort of charisma-based attribute. Number two, the non-player character, or the NPC, agrees too easily to whatever the player says. And then three, there are no real consequences. When those three things happen, players stop engaging deeply because there's nothing to wrestle with. A meaningful social encounter will have a goal, it will have resistance, and then a form of change. Now, in order to make a meaningful social encounter, there are three things that create a framework. One, the NPC wants something. Every NPC in a social encounter needs a goal. They're not just, guard the door. No, that NPC, that guard, wants a promotion. Or they're afraid of losing their job. Or maybe they just hate adventurers. When you decide what the NPC wants, those conversations become dynamic. So for example, let's say there's a town guard and he's really looking for a promotion because his wife is sick and he needs to provide for his wife. If he loses his job or doesn't get this promotion, he can't afford the medicine to heal her, and then she'll be gone forever. So when the adventurers come to the town, he needs to make sure that he does his due diligence and is a good guard so he can get that promotion. So any conversations that occur, that foundation is going to be there, and it's going to prompt the players to respond to that genuine foundation, that genuine goal that this NPC has. Now, with that being said, though, the players are going to want something. I know it sounds obvious, but say it clearly. What are the players trying to get? And ask them, hey, what are you all wanting to get out of this? Or what do you all want, right? Are you trying to gain information, access, forgiveness, protection? That clarity creates tension. And you can even say, as the guard, hey, what do you want? What are you doing here? And if the players act accordingly and kind of work with them, okay, cool. You can then have that social interaction and that encounter. But then number 3, there has to be a risk. If the conversation specifically fails, what happens? Do they lose access? Do they gain an enemy? Do they just waste time? Or do rumors spread? Right? So without risk, there's no wait. So for example, let's say the party goes to the town of Hearthglen, and the guard there is a stickler, is very prominent, very much a goody two shoes, but makes sure really to enforce the rules of the town because they're afraid of losing their job. Due to the stress at home, they will not be able to take care of their family. So the players want to enter Hearthglen for their next quest. They're on a mission. They're investigating a particular wizard that hangs around that area, and they need to ask the wizard question. So they need information and then access to the town, right? So that is what they need. But let's say the conversation goes south, right? Well, they lose access into the town, but then that guard is going to keep an eye on them. Maybe they just gained an enemy, and then now they've wasted time on their quest, so to speak, right? So again, that combination right there created a social encounter framework that allows there to be good storytelling, good role play, and a really good lead into the next part of the session. In my opinion, you do not need acting skills to run a good social encounter. Oftentimes, new dungeon masters think, I'm not good at voices. Well, good news, you don't have to be. Instead of acting, though, just focus on your tone, your body language, and the motivations, right? You can say the guard shifts uncontrollably and avoids eye contact. You don't need an accent. You just need the clarity of what they're doing, right? You can have a more defensive tone and gritted teeth, or you can kind of stutter like this to kind of, portray this nervous or really, you know what I mean? You can kind of portray that, or you can say, hey, I'm a calm individual, right? Beforehand, I was really nervous, so I kind of tensed up a bit. Or I gritted my teeth to show anger and defensiveness, right? You can just tell right there, I just changed my tone and something different came about it. And obviously, if you're playing online or if you're playing in person, your camera's on, so they're going to see your body language, right? But again, you just need that clarity. And then when to roll dice, that's going to be really important because that will help determine that struggle, right? You need to know when and when not to roll. So oftentimes many game masters deal with that struggle. So not every sentence needs a roll, right? The farmer went to the tavern, roll investigation. You don't need that, right? The only time you roll is when the outcome is uncertain or confusing. You also roll when the stakes really matter and when both success and failure are interesting. So for example, I run a Star Wars 5e game every Friday, and there was a session where my players had to convince a group of Mandalorian warriors to let them in and to really provide information and armor for one of the players. What I did is that through the role play, And I told them, I was clear with them. Hey, you're all going to need to role play and converse and really give it your all to convince these Mandalorians and to lower the difficulty rating of that challenge, right? So they did that. And because these Mandalorians had never met them, it wasn't going to just be an auto commitment or an auto guarantee. The outcome was still uncertain. So I definitely rolled the dice, right? The stakes mattered because this was important for the character arc of one of the players. And for them to get really good armor, to be smithed by the Mandalorians, that was really important, right? So the stakes mattered. And then if they failed, it would have been just as interesting as if they succeeded. But you don't need to roll when the NPC would logically agree. Hey, you are in the war effort. You are a Mandalorian. Of course we would forge armor for you. Fine. Okay, so you don't have to roll for that. You don't have to roll for when the information is basic. Hey, where is the town hall? Oh, it's over here. Take a left and you'll see it. Right? You don't have to roll a persuasion or an investigate. You don't have to roll those kind of common Dungeons and Dragons type rolls. You don't have to. If it's common basic information, go with it. And then if failure would stall the game, 1000% don't roll, right? If they roll low and they fail, that just wastes everyone's time. It's not fun. It's not fun for you. The dice should just heighten the tension, not replace the conversation. But before we go into our encounter template, I want to make sure that we talk about making those social encounters impactful, right? These conversations matter long term, and they need to be able to have the power to change the world, right? So if a player insults a noble or earns someone's trust or breaks a promise, right? Those consequences that I've talked about, good, bad, or neutral, you should be able to come back to that later and have some sort of meaningful long-term scenario occur, right? Because then social encounters become meaningful because those consequences linger. They insult a noble, well, 6 months when they come back to the noble's territory, they see bounties on their head with images of these individuals. They get treated poorly, whatever it may be, or the opposite. Maybe they earned that noble's trust because they did a good deed. So later on, when they come back to that city, the people start to praise them. They hold a feast in their honor, right? And hey, anything you need, you got it. And then they can have a bastion. They can have a headquarters or a base of operations in that noble's territory where the noble will protect them, right? But anyway, that social encounter will be meaningful and will have a long-lasting impact. Now, with that being said, before your next session, let's go ahead and prep 3 things to create a simple social encounter. Number 1, what does the NPC want? What is their goal? Once you figure that out, you can write it down, you can put it on your phone, no matter what. But you can just write down and create that goal, that motivation, right? So what does the NPC want? That's number 1. Number 2, what does the NPC fear? Do they fear losing their job? Do they fear some other intrinsic thing? Maybe it is more serious than just losing their job, right? Maybe they fear death. Let's think of Voldemort, right? He feared death for lack of better terms. It's why he went down the path he went down. But number 3, what will they never agree to? Do they have a moral or ethical boundary that they don't cross? Do they have some sort of principle that they don't cross, right? Whatever it may be. But that's it. Those 3 things, motivation, fear, and then what they will never agree to, you just created a social encounter template. You don't even need a script. You don't need to write something down. You don't need to generate something on ChatGPT. You just created a sandbox or boundaries for that social encounter very simply, very quickly. Remember, if you are new to Dungeons and Dragons and you're a new dungeon master or just new to tabletop RPGs, remember this. Social encounters aren't performances. They're about tension and they're about goals colliding. They are about players influencing people, not just defeating the enemy. So start small. Give your NPCs clear motivations. Let those conversations have consequences, and your world will feel alive. If this episode helped you feel more confident about running conversations at the table, share it with your party and with other dungeon masters who avoid social encounters like the plague. Until next time, y'all, build meaningful moments, trust your players, and as always, keep gaming.